People talk about happiness is associated with novelty and gratitude and positive thinking. But they don't tell you that it's really different for everybody.
Let's set up the problem for the audience. What are the risk factors that people encounter every day that are leading to brain disease and inflammation?
So Americans are the unhappiest they've been since the Great Depression. If you think of the pandemic, the societal unrest, the political divide, our obesity epidemic, the epidemic of hypertension that most people really aren't talking about. It's sort of, we're not in a good place. And depression was at epidemic levels before the pandemic. In February of 2020, it was 8.5% of the population. By August of last year, it was at 28%. It had tripled in just a matter of months. And for children, anxiety disorders and depression doubled. So if you think of isolation, fear, death tolls, and then during the pandemic, people engaged in a lot of bad habits. Alcohol went way up, and especially in younger adults, weight problems skyrocketed. And it was actually the worst for early 20-somethings. And all of those things lead to unhappiness. But we're here to talk about happiness. So, one of the things I realized is happiness, like physical health, it's a daily practice. That, you can't be 50 pounds overweight on Monday, have a salad, and expect to be trim on Friday. That you have to work at it. And if you're going to stay healthy, you have to work at it. Mental health is exactly the same way.
I love that. I appreciate that so much. And, just to offer my own anecdote to what we started out talking about, just how bad our habits have become, especially over the past year. I was at Whole Foods the other day in the wine section, and one of the employees came over, very, very gracious to try to help me pick out a bottle. It was my brother's, actually. And he told me that wine has just been flying off the shelves over the past year. And that was really interesting to me, that people are drinking so much more right now.
And alcohol is not a health food. Alcohol is a prescription for unhappiness because people who drink every day have a smaller brain. And when it comes to the brain, size matters. And my biggest blog last year was called I Told You So. I've not been a fan ever since I started looking at the brain because it makes the brain look toxic. And but, I'm fighting against this sort of societal mindset that, I probably should have 1 or 2 glasses of wine a day. And the American Cancer Society came out last year and said we shouldn't drink because any alcohol is associated with an increased risk of 7 different kinds of cancer. And when I first dated my wife, she said, I'll never tell you I told you so. And she completely lied. It's like her favorite thing to say. And so I start the blog with that, but then I went, look, I told you so. This is not good. Cancer is obviously bad for your brain and bad for happiness.
Yeah, you've never been an advocate of alcohol consumption ever since, since I've met you. This has been something that you've always talked about. And it's interesting because some in the medical community will say, well, alcohol in moderation is actually good for you, but we don't really have solid evidence to say that.
It's a lie.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that damages your brain is bad for you. There may be some studies that say there are some heart benefits from the polyphenols, but you can get polyphenols from blueberries or from raspberries. And alcohol causes way too many problems, from drunk driving accidents to domestic violence to divorce to bad decisions during parenting. It even makes you think It makes you misjudge the number of calories that you've eaten a day. And if the goal is to live long and be happy, alcohol is just not a great part of the equation.
Couldn't agree more. So, Doctor, what are the secrets to happiness that no one is talking about?
So there's 7 of them. And the first one is happiness is a brain function. That I actually did a study for this book where we looked at 500 consecutive patients' Damon clinic. So we gave them the Oxford Happiness Questionnaire, a really well-researched questionnaire about happiness. And then we looked at their brains. And the people that were unhappy had lower activity, lower blood flow in the front part of their brain. And what that tells you is you should never let a child hit a soccer ball with their forehead. Damage your frontal lobes, damage happiness. And so I talk about how to keep your brain healthy or rescue it if it's headed for trouble. So that's the first, the foundational, the most important secret. And you look at all the happiness books, nobody talks that happiness is a brain function, and you best keep your brain healthy if you want to be happy. Number 2, people talk about happiness is associated with novelty and gratitude and positive thinking. But they don't tell you that it's really different for everybody. One of the big lessons I learned from imaging is we all have different brains. Some are balanced, some are spontaneous, means they have low frontal lobes, some are persistent, they have high frontal lobe activity, some are sensitive, some are cautious. That we really need to gear happiness strategies to how your brain works rather than thinking one prescription will work for everyone. So, for example, some people like jumping out of airplanes and that makes them super happy. And other people like me think that's just got to be the dumbest thing, the jump out of a perfectly good airplane.
I'm with
you. Some people love scary movies, and people have sleepy frontal lobes. They're the kind of people that get joy running with the bulls in Spain. And people have high frontal lobe activity like me. It's like, nah, I don't think we're going to do that. That just doesn't seem rational. And so targeting the strategy to your brain type is just critical. The third one is supplementing your brain. 97% of the population is low in omega-3 fatty acids. 85% of the population is low in vitamin D. We know both vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids are associated with mood. And so what are the supplements? And my favorite one I talk about in the book is Saffron. There are 24 randomized controlled trials showing Saffron is as effective is antidepressant medication. But rather than most of the medications I prescribe can sort of decrease your sexual function, saffron has been shown to enhance your sexual function.
That's good news.
And then 4 is you only want to love foods that love you back. That nutrition is absolutely essential to a happy life. You know that. But a lot of people, they look at cupcakes and donuts and pastries and pizza and pasta, and they go, oh, that makes me happy. Yes, in the short run, because those things actually can raise serotonin in your brain. The problem is they're addictive and they increase inflammation. So it's not something that'll help you feel better now and later. And that's what you always want to do. You want to learn, what can I do that helps me feel good now and tomorrow? Because that's the prescription for happiness. Hedonism is actually the prescription for unhappiness because it wears out your pleasure centers. Like I've been blessed to see some really amazing people like Justin Bieber and Miley Cyrus and I just got to see Megan Trainor. We did something public together this week, and fame wears out the pleasure centers in your brain. It makes you really vulnerable. 5 is my really fun one. It's gain psychological distance. It's master your mind and gain psychological distance from the noise in your head. And there's a fun technique about giving your mind a name, just to gain separation from that part of you that often abuses you and makes you unhappy. So it's really about mental discipline, which is critical. And 6 is notice what you like about other people. Other people are so contagious, but you have a big control over the quality of your relationships. And then 7 is live each day based on clearly defined values, purpose, and goals. So you have to tell your brain what you want and then ask yourself, does it fit? Does my behavior fit the goals I have for my life? And you do those 7 things. We actually did a 30-day happiness challenge. 32,000 people signed up. At the end of 30 days, for the people who finished it, they were 30% happier. We're pretty excited about that.
That's amazing. So I want to tease out a few things from these 7 secrets that you just listed so eloquently. First off, saffron. How do you integrate saffron? First of all, where do you buy it? How do you integrate it into your diet? Do you integrate it into your cooking, or do you actually take it as a supplement, as you suggested?
So I take it as a supplement every day. And I integrate it into cooking whenever it makes sense. And I could also put it in tea. But my supplement company, BrainMD, I've been following the research for saffron for 15 years. And I'm like, let me get the dose that's in the studies. It's 28 milligrams, a high quality. And then I mixed it with curcumins and zinc, because both of those have been found also to increase your mood. But there are other companies that make it. I think it's just easy to do as a supplement. And I remember when the pandemic started, I just finished it. And we just released it in March of 2020. And my dad got sick and died. I had to close my New York clinic for a while. I think I'm going to take this.
Isn't saffron an essential ingredient in like paella, I want to say?
It is.
It is.
Yeah. It's the main spice in paella.
Is it? Wow. I've impressed myself that I knew that. Yeah, because you usually see it at the checkout counter in supermarkets, and it's this very delicate, wispy, beautiful red spice. I don't know where it comes from, but it can also be.
It's the most expensive spice in the world. So pound for pound, it's more expensive than gold.
Wow.
And it comes from Iran, from Spain, from Greece. Those are the 3 countries that produce the most of it.
Wow. Love that. Definitely going to be looking out for it next time I hit the supermarket. When it comes to nutrition, what are some tenets of your dietary recommendations to support optimal brain health, brain function, and ultimately mental health?
I think it's actually very much like you talk about in your books. It's colorful fruits and vegetables, high fiber. It's getting your gut right. So you have to feed your gut bugs because they make you happy or unhappy. So high quality protein and a whole bunch of healthy fat. That low fat diets are actually bad for happiness. There's a higher incidence of depression. And a lot of people, they get freaked out by fat because of cholesterol. But low cholesterol's been associated with depression and suicide. And so I'm sort of a fan at keeping your cholesterol high normal rather than too many people, their cholesterol's 220 and their doctor puts them on a statin and now it's 120. And that is a big risk for cognitive and mood problems.
Yeah. I mean, there's very high cholesterol that you would see in somebody perhaps with familial hypercholesterolemia. But a lot of people are taking statins like from a Pez dispenser almost for cholesterol levels that are, as you said, just high normal, which I think is kind of a shame.
Well, there's a book I like by Steve Sinatra and Johnny Bowden called The Great Cholesterol Myth. And, mine sort of runs about 220, and a lot of doctors would medicate me. But my HDL is like 90. And so when you actually do the ratio, and I had a coronary CT recently, my heart's just fine. I think it's important to not treat numbers, treat people.
I love that. Couldn't have said that better myself. What are your thoughts on the consumption of animal products? And specifically, there have been a number of really interesting reviews to come out to show associations between low meat diets, vegan, vegetarian diets, and increased risk for depression and other mood disorders.
Yeah, I'm sort of, I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm a fan of fish, and healthy fish, sustainable fish, clean fish, because of the omega-3 content. And the human brain actually started to grow when humans started to eat meat, because our intestinal system could shrink, which would leave more energy for the brain. The problem is so much of the commercially raised meat is really not very good for you because the omega-6 fatty acid content. But grass-fed meat, lamb, also turkey, chicken, if you're raising, I call it soul food, sustainable, organic, unadulterated, locally grown. I'm a fan of meat because, quite frankly, you can't get omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA, from plants. And people go, well, what about flaxseed oil? You have to have 10 times the number of flaxseed oil as fish oil. And, and I, have this discussion a lot with my vegan patients, and sometimes for them it's just a value, and so I nudge them to get algae-based EPA and DHA. But generally, for myself, I think adding thoughtful animal products is a good idea.
I love this, and to be honest, I think that we should be able to have a discussion that candidly takes into account the breadth of the science that's out there, because, I think too often we allow facts to bend towards people's feelings, but facts ultimately shouldn't have to cater to one's feelings, right? We're just talking about what is optimal. And of course, everybody has their own ethics and their own MO when it comes to what they choose to put into their bodies. But if you're struggling with a condition related to mental health, stick with the science and what the science says about nutrition and brain health.
Well, Max, part of the problem is so much of the science is confusing. And scientists, when they publish a study, they have biases. And their bias often gets hidden in the numbers. So you'll find, vegans will go, well, look at all these studies. And meat eaters will go, but look at all these studies. And there's actually pretty good science. And that's why people get so confused. But, as I look at the research over time, people with low levels of omega-3 fatty acids, I actually published a big study on this, they have lower blood flow in their brain. Omega-3s are just absolutely essential for so many things, including decreasing inflammation.
Yeah, there was a study that just came out. It was a randomized controlled trial. I'm sure you've seen it. I think I shared it earlier this week. older adult patients with coronary artery disease that's supplemented with about 3 grams of combined EPA and DHA every day saw an improvement in their cognitive function, whereas the placebo cohort, continued to decline. So I think you're right. Omega-3s are super important from a vascular health standpoint. And we know that plays such an important role in good brain health.
Vascular and inflammation. Those are 2 of the major risk factors for dementia. And I know that's what started you on this journey, how to not get dementia. And I have a mnemonic I like called Bright Minds. But the B is for blood flow, absolutely essential. And the I is inflammation.
So important. So your new book, you really blow the lid off of this notion that we all have different brain types. And that was, one of the secrets that you mentioned briefly to happiness that nobody's talking about. But I would love to go into this for a bit because, we've talked in the past on this show about chronotypes, which was a totally mind-blowing subject for my listeners, but we all have different brain types. And I think this is so interesting. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Well, when I first started looking at the brain, 1991, with a study called SPEC that we do at Amen Clinics, I'm like, oh, everybody's different. And I had this one couple who was failing in marital therapy. And I was about ready to throw in the towel when I started looking at their brains. Like I was ready to tell them to get divorced because I'm like, this isn't working. And then I scanned them. He had really sleepy frontal lobes and she had really busy frontal lobes. Well, for him, that's where I went with ADD, impulse control. He would love novelty and spontaneity, and a routine sex life would just bore him. Where with her busy frontal lobes, she loved routine and wanted things the same way. And I'm like, oh, the scans help me see the personality of the people in front of me. And so, the treatment for him was increasing his frontal lobes. The treatment for her was decreasing it. And then they could come in a balanced way and be happy. And over time, there are 5 primary types. So there's balanced, your brain's overall healthy, and most anything will make you happy. There's low activity in the frontal lobes. We call those people spontaneous. They need novelty. Your frontal lobes work too hard. You like routine. If you're going to pick your religion, you'll pick one with ritual, like you'll become Lutheran or Catholic. And, you just love routine. It just makes you comfortable and that makes you happy. And then there's our sensitive group that need connection with others. Their limbic brain works hard. The pandemic was really hard on them. And then there's our cautious group, our anxious group. They're never going to jump out of an airplane. And they do really well with like a warm bath or lavender. So knowing your type is just critical to knowing what are the strategies for you to be happy.
Well, that's so interesting. Are you finding that these brain types are rooted in anatomical differences in our brains, genetic differences? What do they stem from? Functional
differences, how our brains work. And we tend to inherit them, but our life can impact them. So, for example, if you have a head injury, you're going to be more likely to be spontaneous because you hurt your frontal lobes. If you had early childhood trauma, you might have a combination of persistent, sensitive, and cautious because the stress you grew up in caused your emotional brain to become hyperactive. If your mom and dad were really thoughtful about their health before they had you, and they gave you like good guidance and firm limits and a healthy diet, you're just more likely to be balanced. But too often, nobody's really thinking about preconception medicine because, they're teenagers and young adults. And we don't do a good job of educating people about brain health. It just puts people to be more vulnerable.
I feel like I might have a balanced brain type. I don't know if I necessarily relate to the more spontaneous brain type. My therapist actually says I need to work on being more spontaneous. I'm pretty sensitive, but I don't know if I'm overly so. Maybe I'm cautious. I don't know.
We haven't scanned you, have we?
I think you did for that segment on the Dr. Oz show that we were on together.
Didn't we do a QEEG as opposed to a SPECT scan? I think we did a QEEG.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, the segment that we were on was about technology. So you scanned my brain before and after using a smartphone. Right.
It was a QEEG where we looked at the electrical activity of your brain. And given your family history, I'm doing this series on Instagram called Scan My Brain, where we're taking young influencers. That's where he did Meghan Trainor recently, and scanning them and then talking about it and then putting it out on Instagram. You'd be great for our series. We should talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. I mean, to be honest, I'd just be happy to confirm that I have a brain. Just to know that there's something in there and that it's functioning, firing on all cylinders. So this is super cool. And all of these brain types, I mean, they all fall within the realm of normal, right? I mean, there's no one brain type that's healthier or better than another. It's really a testament to the fact that we're all unique. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, although I think for my patients, they want to sort of strive for that balanced type. From a clinical standpoint, our spontaneous group tends to go more with ADD. Our persistent group, they can be neurosurgeons or sort of to the extreme can have OCD. The sensitive group, a lot of therapists, but can also struggle with depression. And our cautious group tends to be anxious. Although what I tell people, you need some anxiety in order to be happy. That people with low levels of anxiety die early from accidents and preventable illnesses. And so whenever I talk about anxiety, I'm like, well, let's talk about optimal anxiety, because that prevents you from doing stupid things that make you sad, right? Having an affair, driving too fast, experimenting with drugs, eating bad food, whatever. So it's you want to have enough anxiety, you do the right things, because that'll keep you happy, versus too much anxiety, which will obviously make you miserable.
Yeah, a little bit of anxiety actually boosts performance. But
correct, because you're prepared.
Yeah. I love this idea that what is going to bring about my optimal happiness is different than what might bring about my friend's optimal happiness, that we're also different. But can you just give me some specific examples? Like, what is something that a sensitive brain type, somebody listening to this who finds that they're very sensitive to world events and the energy in the room, what can they do to attain greater happiness that maybe might not work as well for somebody with a cautious brain type, and what can that person do?
So the sensitive person really does need to turn off the news, because it has a big negative effect for them. They need to be connected to people in their life that sort of feed their soul. The spontaneous person, not so much. Negative news sort of stimulates them, and they're always ready to fight about their position one way or another, but doesn't make them sad. The sensitive person does really well with supplements like SAMI or Saffron. The cautious person, they need things that calm down their nervous system in order for them to be okay. So things like meditation and hypnosis, soothing music. And one of the strategies is, get a playlist of 10 songs that make you happy. And they're all soothing for the cautious group. They're connected for the sensitive group. So it's like, I have this song with my mom, or I have this song with my husband, or I have this song with somebody I love. So sensitive, it's really about connection that makes them happy. The cautious group, things that soothe them. The persistent group, they can get into a routine that makes them happy. Coming up on the holidays, they love the holidays unless there's trauma in there for them. The spontaneous people don't really love the holidays because you have to sort of plan for them. And for them, they're all, they're shopping Christmas Eve for other people in their life because they're not big on planning.
Interesting. Now you're making me feel like I do have a little bit of spontaneous brain type in me because I'm a terrible planner, and I like trips, holidays. I'm the worst at that. I have a very close friend, actually. His name is Brian. He, I think, might be the sensitive brain type. And he always talks about how, he'll say things like, oh, my nervous system can't handle that. He doesn't drink coffee, for example. Is coffee something that if you have a sensitive brain type, you might choose to avoid?
Yes, because it'll agitate you. Same for the cautious people. Spontaneous people love coffee. In fact, coffee calms them down.
Wow.
So knowing your type, and then, one of the cool parts about the book is looking for the micro moments of happiness as you go through your day. What are those things that just give you a little squirt of dopamine? And I talk about the different chemicals of happiness: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, GABA. And like hummingbirds for me, I don't know what it is. I just love hummingbirds in the morning. If I sit outside and I have a decaf cappuccino I make for my wife every morning. And, if they're hummingbirds or butterflies or gardenias, special flower my dad used to grow, because it connects me with him, and that makes me happy. But if you can sort of notice what makes you happy and then begin to take a list, because where you bring your focus always determines how you feel. And if you're sort of looking for happiness, you're just more likely to find it.
Are there any exercises that you offer people to help them make what it is in their lives become more clear?
Well, the seventh secret is live each day based on clearly defined values, purpose, and goals. And there are exercises for all three of those. What are your values? And so I like to separate them into biological values like health, memory, psychological values like honesty, flexibility, social values like connection or kindness, and spiritual values. And so there's like a dozen in each category. And it's like pick two or three from each category and ask yourself, when I make a decision, well, does it fit the values I choose for my life? And then there's an exercise on purpose that I like a whole bunch. It's like how to know your purpose in 5 minutes. Really special. And then I have them make clearly defined goals: biological goals, psychological goals, social and spiritual goals. And once you do that, it's an exercise I love called the one-page miracle. On one piece of paper, write down what you want. So, for example, with my wife, I want a kind, caring, loving, supportive, passionate relationship. Always want that. Don't always feel like that. Sometimes my mind will show up with rude comments to say. And when I filter it through does it fit? It's like, oh, don't say that because it won't get you what you want, right? So it's not I should or shouldn't do that. As soon as you tell somebody you shouldn't do it, they want to do it, right? It's like, here are your goals. Does your behavior fit what you want? It's so powerful. And each of these 7 secrets have a simple question. And the question for live each day is, does it fit? Does my behavior fit what I want? So if I want to be 150 pounds, because I come from a family of fat people, I have a brother and a sister that are 150 pounds overweight, and I'm not. Why? Because I don't give in to the behaviors, making it likely to be so. So when I look at the brownie or I look at the pasta or look at the pizza, I'm like, oh, it's a weapon of mass destruction for me. And I don't eat it. Not because I shouldn't eat it. I don't eat it because I love myself. And I want to live each day based on the values, purpose, and goals I have for my life.
I love that. You really have to cultivate self-love. It's so important, especially these days. Where does meditation play a role in your prescription for happiness?
Meditation crosses biological, psychological, and spiritual circles. I love meditation. I published a study on a Kundalini yoga form of meditation called Kirtan Kriya. It's actually a singing meditation. So 12 minutes of sa, ta, na, ma, sa, ta, na, ma, increases blood flow to the frontal lobes, calms down your emotional brain. 12-minute meditation, really pretty cool. I also talk about loving kindness meditation that I love a lot. And that would fit under 5, manage your mind and gain psychological distance from the noise in your head. That one, it's just so rich. I talk about killing the ants, the automatic negative thoughts that steal people's happiness, meditation, hypnosis. And I have a fun exercise in there about interrupting unnecessary unhappy moments. So if your brain tends to default to an unhappy moment, for example, performance anxiety before you have to give a talk, you actually go into feel bad on purpose. And then, so go to that moment that makes you feel awful. Go feel bad on purpose. And then stand up and say, stop, and consciously go to one of the happiest moments of your life. Another exercise, write down the 20 happiest moments of your life. And then re-experience that with all of your senses. And you'll just notice how your brain shifts. And then celebrate, because celebration will anchor the happiness into your brain. And it's so simple, but can be so helpful.
Simple, helpful, powerful. Well, you mentioned ants, automatic negative thoughts. What are those?
So we live basically in a society of undisciplined thinkers. That they should have taught us this in 2nd grade. I was 28 before I learned I did not have to believe every stupid thought I had. That thoughts lie, they lie a lot, and it's our uninvestigated thoughts that make us miserable. And here I am, I'm 28 in my psychiatric residency. I'm listening to this professor talk about cognitive behavior therapy, and I'm like, I basically believe all the stupid thoughts I've had my whole life. It's like, no wonder you're anxious. And so the exercise is whenever you're sad or you're mad or you're nervous or out of control, write down what you're thinking. And then ask yourself, is it true? Can I absolutely know if that's true? And there's a whole process that I take people through. And I'm just stunned by the number of people where no one's ever taught them to not believe everything they think. And thoughts come from all sorts of places. They're written in our genetic code. If, your parents have had trauma, they come from the voices of your mom and dad or your siblings or your friends or the news, you watch or the music you listen to. And just because you have a thought has nothing to do with whether or not it's true. Thoughts lie, and it's our uninvestigated thoughts that drive depression. Head to head against antidepressants, learning not to believe everything you think has been shown to be equally effective.
I love that. What are some, specific examples of those kinds of thoughts? Like, I'm a terrible dancer because somebody once told you 20 years ago that for whatever reason, they didn't think that you were a good dancer. Or I have a terrible singing voice because somebody back when you were in choir, in elementary school might have, some bully might have said that to you. Well, are those, would you say that?
Do you have a negative thought? We'll work on that now. We'll show people. What's a common negative thought that runs through your head?
Oh man, a common negative thought that runs through my head. I don't have any. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I haven't really had like a long-term, I haven't really had a healthy long-term adult relationship. I've had a lot of short ones that are fun and, and productive and healthy, but I haven't had like a long-term one. So
is the thought, I'm not capable, or there's something the matter with me, or what's the thought?
Maybe that I'm, well, I was going to say maybe I'm too picky or something, but maybe the thought is I'm not capable. So I just end up having all these, I end up like going for the low hanging fruit, the shorter term, where I don't have to work too hard.
So you write that down. I'm not capable of having a long-term relationship. And they're 5 simple questions. And I learned this from my friend Byron Katie, but they're so good. The first question is that true? You're not capable of having a long-term relationship. And I'm not a fan of positive thinking. I'm a fan of accurate thinking. So just do this with me. Is it true? You're not capable.
Is it true? No, it's not true. But I just, maybe I feel sometimes as though it's like not in the cards for me or something.
Right. So the answer is no. The second question, if 1 is no, 2 is automatically no. Because if you said yes, I would go, well, is it absolutely true? With 100% certainty, you're not capable of having a long-term relationship.
Right. The answer to that would be no.
No. The third question is, how do you feel when you believe that you're not capable of having a long-term relationship?
I feel bad.
Yeah. And you feel lonely, and you feel maybe more irritable when they disappoint you the first time. And you're like, this isn't going to work because it's not worked. And the fourth question is, how would you feel if you didn't have that thought? If you couldn't have the thought, I'm not capable of having a long-term relationship.
If I didn't have that thought, I would feel more empowered. I would feel more free.
I love that.
Yeah.
Freedom is the most common thing people say. And the fifth question is, take the original thought, I'm not capable of having long-term relationships, and turn it to its exact opposite. Now, not the narcissistic opposite, but just the opposite, which is, I am capable of long-term relationships. And then just ask yourself, do I have any evidence that the opposite is in fact true too?
I love that. I feel like this is like, I over the past 8 months, I've started seeing like a therapist who specializes in like relationship stuff, and she's got me like meditating. This is like definitely very, very helpful.
So how would you answer that question? Do you have any evidence
that I am capable?
That you are capable?
Yeah, I feel like I have lots of, as I mentioned, I have lots of shorter term, and I've had a long-term on and off again relationship that wasn't the healthiest relationship, but there was nonetheless a lot of love there, and trauma and all that stuff. But yeah. And so I have those data points, but then I also know that I am somebody who has a lot of long-term relationships, of the non-romantic variety that are very meaningful in my life. So I have lots of friends that I've had long-term relationships with, and I have long-standing relationships with the things in my life that I love, that might not be romantic, but for example, music, my relationship with fitness, my relationship with health and nutrition and how much I love those topics, my relationship with technology. So yeah, so those are all, I think, meaningful data points. Are they not?
And, one of my greatest gifts and also biggest challenges is I'm persistent. I was in a marriage for 20 years. It was awful for me. And so, yes, I'm capable of being in a long-term painful relationship, but that's not necessarily a good thing.
Right.
And Tana and I have been together 16 years, and that's a good thing. So I think it's okay to be selfish in the sense that, does it fit? So really know what you want in a relationship and just find out if it's a fit, always when you're doing the work on yourself. So I love that you're seeing somebody and working on healthy cognitive habits, emotional habits, but it's okay if it doesn't fit to say it doesn't fit, that's a sign of health, not that you're flawed, if that makes sense.
Wow. So did I just crush an ant? Is that what I just did right there?
You killed an ant.
I killed an ant.
Killed an ant. And one of the things, like when I saw Megan this week, I'm like, I want you to write down 100 of your worst thoughts. And then do those 5 questions thoughtfully, meditatively, with each of those 100 negative thoughts. And then your brain will start to default to question number 5. So if I get the thought, Tana never listens to me, I'll go, Tana does listen to me. And then I'll find the evidence and the thought won't bother me. But if I don't question that thought, I believe it, and then I act as if it's true. And that negative thought would actually give me permission to ignore her or be rude to her or feel sad because I believed a lie. And in the New Testament, there's a Bible verse, John 8:32, know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And that's what I want for my patients, not positive thinking. I want accurate thinking. Now, I'll put a positive spin on it because that helps. Like I start every day with today is going to be a great day, get my mind going in a helpful direction. I finish every day with what went well today. But yet I want my mind thinking clearly, honestly, and accurately. And when I, get thoughts I don't need, everybody hates me, right? If you get a comment on social media of somebody that's just awful, managing your mind helps you be happy.
Managing your mind helps you be happy. So true. Is there a specific morning routine that you would recommend? You mentioned, waking up with a certain mantra. What, could you talk to me more about that?
So I'm a very routine oriented person, and I start every day with today is going to be a great day. In fact, it's always on the top of my to-do list if I forget. And then I just sort of, what am I looking forward to today? That makes me happy. I do not start the day with Fox or CNN. I start the day with Good News Network. I'm looking for what's right in the world rather than just what's wrong. And then I will have a moment. I feed the dog brain healthy food and make this decaf cappuccino for my wife, and we spend time together. I also make a shake in the morning. And then I walk for 40 minutes while I do 2 huddles for work. I think it's really great to have a little huddle with yourself in the morning. What are my goals? What did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? But I do that with my team at Amen Clinics. But I can't sit on Zoom all day long. It'll just make me crazy. So I do those meetings while I'm walking, generally someplace beautiful like Newport Beach or Corona Del Mar. And then, as I go about my day, I focus on question number 4. Is this food I love that loves me back? Because I just think nutrition is so important. And then at dinner, I have 3 kids still at home. I'm like, what went well today? That's the most common question. What went well today? And then when I put myself to sleep at night, I say a prayer. And then I go, what went well today? And I actually start at the beginning of the day, just looking. And I'm always stunned by all the really cool things that I didn't really pay attention to. And it sets my dreams up to be more happy and more positive. And if you want to feel better tomorrow, sleep better tonight.
I love that. You mentioned in the morning you have a shake. Have to ask, what's in it? What's in that? What's in Dr. Daniel Amen's morning brain shake?
Oh, I love it so much. I told you I have a supplement company. So we make super clean, super healthy protein powder. And I like chocolate. It's got no sugar and a ton of fiber, plant protein. And I put Bright Minds powder. It's our combination of a great multiple vitamin and a brain boost, something called Smart Mushrooms with 6 different kinds of therapeutic mushrooms, neurogreens, a cup of strawberries or blueberries, a little bit of stevia blended. It's how I take half my supplements, and it tastes great. 230 calories, love it, loves me back. Just super happy. A lot of people, some of our friends, they go, oh, calories don't matter. And I think they're completely out to lunch, right? Coming from a family of fat people, like, no, calories really do matter. You can't have like a box of nuts, even though nuts are really good for you, and expect to be trim. So I sort of think of calories like money. And I always have a sense, if I eat 1,800 calories a day, my weight stays fine. If I pop up above that, I get a little chubby, which makes me unhappy.
Yeah, I agree. Calories definitely do matter. Are you, do you track your calories, or do you just at this point have an intuitive sense of how many you're consuming?
If I start gaining weight, I start writing them down. And during the pandemic, I only gained like a couple of pounds, but I could tell my pants were tighter, and I measured my waist, and I'm like, oh, because what cortisol does is it actually puts belly fat on you. And so even though my weight didn't change, my body was starting to change because of sort of the assault of stress that, was really hitting all of us. But I had lost my dad in the process, and that was hard for me. And so when that happens, I just, it's just on my phone in the notes section. I just start writing down what I eat, because people have calorie amnesia, and they forgot what they put in their mouth. And I'm a value spender. I have plenty of money, but I still hate wasting money, and I hate wasting calories. And people go, oh, that's so much work. I'm like, no, being sick is work, right? That's hard. Doing the right thing, it's a routine, right? I mean, everybody's in a routine. Does your routine serve you, or does it hurt you? And I just want to be in a routine that serves, because like you, I have a big mission in life. and I want to be around to enjoy it.
Yeah. And calories, I mean, we live in a time of energy excess, right? I mean, the major chronic non-communicable diseases, I mean, at their core, you could almost argue that that the etiology comes back to energy toxicity. We're eating too much, right?
We're eating too much, and we're eating too much of the wrong things that promote inflammation. And we just, I mean, if you just restricted calories, you're not going to get healthy, right? If you went on a Twinkie diet, that'd sort of be stupid,
right?
Because you get inflamed and then your metabolism would slow down and you'd have no energy. So quality matters probably more, but quantity matters as well. And so high quality calories and not too many of them.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed that conversation, you're going to love this one. So I want to talk to you about unlocking your brain's potential.
Yeah.
And you came in with some things that you specifically wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I was just talking about some of the things during the pandemic. The metaphor I was using with clients is, we understand things based on symbols, metaphors, relating things, something we don't know to something we already know. Right, it's a great way of hacking your learning. And the metaphor I was using is that of a butterfly. And I feel like a butterfly is the profound symbol of transformation, right? And while the beauty is in the butterfly, a lot of growth happens in the cocoon. And I think a lot of times, people the past couple of years, they feel like they've been cocooning, right? They've been physically distancing themselves. They might be working remotely or learning, from home. They might be alone with their doubts. They might be alone with their fears. There's a lot of fear out there. And they might be feeling, lonely, and mental health is a big challenge. So in Limitless, I have a quote from a French philosopher, and he says, "Life is the C between B and D," which is interesting. Life is C between B and D, and B stands for birth, D stands for death, life, C, choice. I really do believe that these difficult times, they could define us. These difficult times can diminish us, or these difficult times could actually develop us. We decide. We always decide on our choices. We could decide on our thoughts. We could decide on our behaviors. We could decide on what experiences mean. We could decide on how we want to feel more often. We certainly could decide what we put in our mind and in our body also as well, how we move our body. And just reminding people. So there are about 5 or 6 choices. Just I want to remind everybody, who's listening, that you could make to come out of this cocoon stronger, so that you could potentially even soar to new heights, right? I'll make them all C's because I tend to alliterate everything just to make it a little bit more memorable. I'm kind of OCD like that. And then we could chat about it. The first one, I think, in no specific order, the first C is clarity. I think solitude is a wonderful time for self-reflection. I don't think, I think self-awareness is a superpower, and we don't, always in society when we're going 100 miles an hour, we don't take time and just kind of check in with ourselves, in terms of, one of the clarifying questions I love: what's most important to you in blank? What's most important to you in life? What's most important to you in a career? What's most important to you, if in zero-based thinking, if we're, with everything going on, if you're to start over, what's most important to you in a relationship, in your personal contribution, in your health, right? So that gives us some values, because sometimes, again, there's a great book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is a classic by Dr. Stephen Covey. He says, you don't want to climb the ladder of success, get to the top and realize it's leaning on the wrong wall, right? And the second clarifying question, I think, besides what's most important to you in these areas, and which I would encourage everyone to use this time to do, is are my actions today, align with those values? Are they supporting, that direction? Meaning, a lot of people, I'm sure, who are listening or watching on YouTube, that they feel like burnt out. They feel mentally exhausted, right? And they think it's because they're doing too much. And while that might be a contributing factor, I find that sometimes we feel burnt out, not because we're doing too much, but because we're doing too little of the things that make us come alive. You know what I mean? And so those are the things that we're kind of pinpointing our target, our true north, what's most important to us in these areas, and our daily activities, leading us there. That's clarity. The second C, I would say, which, your podcast covers in so well, is care. We know that self-care is not selfish. And I don't just mean, eating the best, amazing foods ever and optimizing our sleep. I also mean like part of self-care is putting borders and boundaries around the things that are important to us, and also being conscious and standing guard to our mind of what we're letting inside. Meaning, we know when we're talking about the brain that with media, it's interesting. There's an algorithm kind of like with our mind, like there is with Instagram or any social media. The algorithm primarily is whatever you engage with the most, you're gonna get more of, right? So if you watch your cat videos and cat posts, you're engaging and you're sharing cats, you're liking it, commenting on cat posts, then the algorithm shows you more cats, right?
Guilty. Yes.
Right. And then also, but our mind has a similar algorithm. And if we're just watching like the news and what's, on social media, dark, threatening, scary and fearful because our amygdala is getting hijacked. If it bleeds, it leads, that whole thing. We have to be very conscious because if that's what we're engaging with, then our mind's algorithm is going to, the filter, because we could pay attention to a billion different stimuli. Primarily, I think our brain deletes more, right? Otherwise we would be overloaded, overwhelmed. And so what it lets in are the things that you're building awareness for, you have questions about, that have dominant importance for. And if you're engaging with what's dark and scary, the challenge is we start seeing more and more of that in our perception. And that doesn't leave a lot of bandwidth for possibility, hope, opportunity, what you could be grateful for, right? And so that could be a challenge. We know that chronic stress has been shown to shrink the human brain. Chronic fear actually suppresses our immune system. So that's interesting, right? A whole area of science called psychoneuroimmunology. It makes you more susceptible to colds, to flus, to viruses, right? And so when we're talking about care, obviously there are a lot of things we could do to care for ourselves. And I'm just kind of highlighting the thing that might not be is what we're feeding our minds. And so we can make choices. We can make choices for clarity, is making these questions, choices going back to power decisions on what we're feeding our minds and our bodies. Third C is kind of obvious, but it's not something we think about all the time. I think one of the antidotes to fear, going back to fear, is besides gratitude. And a lot of times we know gratitude. I did a Thanksgiving episode on our podcast about how gratitude can rewire our nervous system for performance. And it's interesting because you don't have to wait for a greater life to feel grateful. You could start feeling grateful, and I think people would immediately say they have a greater life, because what we appreciate appreciates, right? Yeah, it gets better and it grows. But going back to that's one antidote to fear. The other one I would say is the third C, which is contribution.
Hmm.
I think making a difference. I think even for me, like growing up with learning difficulties, my biggest challenge, I mean, my superpower was being invisible, right? I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to, maybe deep down, I wanted to be seen and heard, but I was mostly hiding, in the back, sitting behind a tall kid because I never had the answers. So I was very phobic of public speaking, which the universe has this, sense of humor because my two biggest challenges were learning and public speaking. And, what do I do for a living?
I mean, now you're educating the world on how to learn faster, and you talk publicly for a living.
Yeah, and so it's kind of it's kind of interesting how your struggles can become strengths, right? Your their challenges could lead to change, which was what I'm hoping for with my sleep, right? Because of all this perfect storm of having this kind of severe challenge I want to overcome. I think one nice dominant question to ask yourself is, where's the gift in this? My challenges were learning, and the gift was I discovered how to learn better, right? I don't believe it's how smart you are. We've talked about this in previous podcasts. So it's really, how are you smart? My challenge was public speaking. I would be, I'd be so fearful. I would be shaking and almost pass out. And that led to a strength. And I hope there's a gift in even the challenges I had with sleep. I could tell you two of them automatically. Number one, with the lack of sleep, it forced me to double down on everything I teach. Because how would I be able to perform and do anything if I wasn't, be able to have that edge of reading faster, remembering things, and assimilating information, and all my routines and everything. But the other gift was it forced me to be very conscious of my commitments. I don't know how it is with you, but some people who are watching might identify with saying yes too often, right? You overcommit, you have too many browsers open, and it uses up so much energy. And so when you have a finite, you feel like you have a limited amount of energy or temperament or emotion, or like with your lack of sleep. And I don't say, yeah, everything for me is really, it's heck yes or heck no. I mean, that kind of filter. And so like right now, there's nowhere I'd rather be with no one else. You know what I mean? So everything is like it's makes things very clear, which I think it's important nowadays for people who are struggling with mental exhaustion, mental fatigue, burnout.
People are so lax with their time, and it is the most precious and limited resource that we have. Once you spend it, you don't get it back.
Yeah, and that's the one thing. I mean, people could always make more money, I mean, and it's the one thing that's actually, equal, at least in a day. And not everybody has the same income or the same education level or the same network, right? But everybody has 24 hours in a day, right? We have 86,400 seconds. And what we invest, we get to keep in the future, but in whatever's not, it's just lost, right? And there's no judgment. People want to binge watch, and do like whatever they do, or that's their life, then it's prerogative. People have choice and free will. It's amazing. But then we can't complain about stuff then, right? I mean, you can't be upset by the results you didn't get by the work you didn't do. So a lot of energy goes into complaining and comparison and overthinking, and we try to direct our clients away from that. But going back to contribution, I just feel like it's the antidote to fear. It's if I get nervous a little bit still, butterflies before. I'm here in Los Angeles. I just spoke for 2,000 people yesterday. I'm going out tomorrow to Vegas to speak for thousands there, and I still get a little nervous, but then I just think about contribution. Like I think about one person in that audience whose life, needs to could use some of this information, and I feel more obligation to be able to do that, because shame on me if there's somebody there struggling like I did for so many years, and I don't help them, and that gets me out of myself and that contribution. So for us, we like Limitless, we gave away 100% of the proceeds, multiple six figures to build schools. We built schools everywhere from Ghana to Guatemala to Kenya, full health care for the children, clean water, also Alzheimer's research. So many great organizations that you and I know of, and some of um, our peers. I lost my grandmother to Alzheimer's when I was going through my learning difficulties, and women, as you know, are twice as likely to experience Alzheimer's than men. So for specifically women's research.
Love that.
So yeah, but I mean, in terms of contribution, it doesn't have to be like that. It could be, how can you invest a little bit of your time, your talent, your treasure, just to make a difference and just put you in a good place. Maybe make it food for frontline workers. Maybe it's checking on somebody who's elderly and a little bit compromised and they're lonely, that kind of thing. And then finally, the last couple of C's, besides clarity and care and contribution, I would say creativity. Like, I don't know, what have you been doing the past year and a half? I mean, everybody has like a to-do list, but do we have like a create list?
So
I
important.
Yeah, I mean, I think the future belongs to creators. So I love it, that some people creating new businesses, some people are doing their music, and then they get the
Yeah.
guitar and they're singing. Other people are writing, but I think, even before this, jobs are they're being outsourced, right? They're going to automation, they're going to artificial intelligence, and what's not going to be outsourced to a machine is what's truly limitless. Like there's no limit to our creativity. There's no limit to human imagination. There's no limit to our ability to solve problems, our ability to come together, in difficult times. And so, yeah, it's interesting. There's during the Great Plague that Shakespeare, when I was doing research, created some amazing masterpieces. Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra. During the plague, Isaac Newton had to physically distance himself from London. They closed down the university there, and he had to go home. Even back then, and he was sitting underneath a tree, and an apple fell on his head, and he created the theories of motion, the theories of gravity, right? And so again, we don't have to do it at that level, but what have you always wanted to create, in your life? Maybe you're a parent, you wanted to create something, for your students, for your kids, maybe like homeschool. It's whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, it
I'd love
reminds
to
me of one of my favorite lines from Game of Thrones.
Mhm.
Peter Baelish is talking to Varys in the I forget what it's called, like the main throne area in at King's Landing, and Varys says to Peter Baelish, just everything is in such disarray. Everybody's warring, fighting. There's so much chaos, and Varys makes a comment implying that chaos is a pit. It's like a pit of despair, a pit into which all hope falls, never to be seen again, right? And Baelish responds to him, Varys, chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder. And I just love that. It reminds me
really
of that.
With the accent and everything.
Yeah, with the accent and everything. It's one of my favorite lines in one of my favorite shows. So it's just something that always has resonated with me. The notion that, we tend to see danger and chaos as being a point of repression, like some of us feel repressed during those moments, but then others see great opportunity. Which is, I think, kind of like, the gist of what it is that you're saying.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I want to, maybe we could chat about how mindset affects and kind of filters meaning for us. That somebody could have the same experience and interpret it in different ways, whether looking at the economy or politics or, any kind of situation. So that's creativity. And again, simple choice. Life is a C between B and D. What choices can we make to be a little bit more creative? And I'm not saying it has to take a lot of time, with this. It could be even journaling for 10 minutes, or writing or going. I think it's very important that we schedule a white space in our days, to just think and be creative. Because if we just wait in between, and it is those empty spaces are very rare. You know what I mean? It usually fills with other stuff that's not as important. I always tell people I think the most important thing is to keep the most important things the most important things. It's kind of a little bit of a tongue twister, but yeah, it's not just about time management, it's about priority management, right? I'm going back to the 24 hours we have in a day. It's setting our priorities. We have the 24 hours in a day, but what are we going to emphasize? What are we going to put first? And like even Dr. Stephen Covey's going back to his book, right? Put first things first, right? And then finally, the fifth C, besides clarity and care and contribution, and creativity, I would say is capabilities. And this quote that I've heard in different iterations, I'm sure your audience has. It's like we don't rise to the level of other people's expectations as much as we fall to the level of our own training. And I think again we have a to-do list which is rapidly growing, but do we have a to learn list? Like what's on everyone's to learn list? And I think we do these things where now if especially if you are spending more time at home or have been spending more time at home and you have more time, like what are you putting on there? Because the future belongs to those learners, right? We have to constantly be upgrading our knowledge, our skills, our own abilities to be more valuable. And I think one of the most important things people could be doing is reading. I did so much reading. I was with so many of our clients. We had reading, challenges, a book a week club, and everything else like that. We got so much engagement, this past year and a half because people, and in book sales, I hear are actually doing really well, because of everything. And I just think if somebody has decades of experience and they put into a book, and you could sit down in a few days and read a book or listen to an audible, then you could download decades into days. The average person reading one or two books a year compared to somebody who's doing upwards of 50 books a year. Huge. It's not even like a gap between those who have and those who don't have. There's also a gap of those who know and those who don't know. And those who know can make better decisions, going back to the power of decisions and choice, more accurate, useful decisions. And so, what's on everyone's to learn list? And my focus, we've covered speed reading in a previous episode on your show. My focus is on meta learning, learning how to learn. Because I feel like if someone could learn how to learn, like learn how to, what does that mean? Learn how to focus and concentrate, learn how to study better, take notes, understand information better, remember that information, improve their memory, and make better, critical thinking. I think they could apply that towards anything better, whether it's money, management, marketing, martial arts, music, everything gets movement, everything gets better and easier. So those are five. I would also add now that I think about it, a 6C. There are probably a lot more 6Cs. I'm curious. People could post this on social media and suggest it, tag us both so we get to see it. Community. With this where people feel separate, and so distance or apprehensive. I think more and more people need to connect, and who we spend time with is who we become. And people ask, with the book title Limitless, it's like, how do you become limitless in this limited world? And my answer, I think, really is we do it together.
Well,
Right.
there's that famous line, right? I don't know where it originated from, but you become the average of the 5 or
Hmm.
6 or 7 people that you hang out with most.
Yeah, I think it, and that's a, having a positive peer group. We all need somebody to encourage us, to challenge us, to give us hope, to cheer us on. And if you haven't found that person, I would recommend be that person for somebody else.
Hmm.
You know, yeah, I was reading studies on mirror neurons and how they potentially could help. Um, it's part of the in our nervous system where it creates empathy, and we start imitating people around us, right? Who we spend time with. I always tell people to watch because these are the things that imitated WATCH, and of course I use a lot of acronyms and mnemonics. The W say words. We tend to adopt the language patterns of people around us for
Hmm.
sure. The A in watch is your actions. Certainly, we start duplicating the behaviors of people around us. You spend time. That's why they say like married couples they tend to look like each other over time, or they look like their pet or something like that because they're spending a lot of time. But watch your actions. The T in watch, your thoughts. Thoughts are really things, and I know you've covered this in episodes. And the C in watch or character.
Hmm.
We tend to have the same standards of the people around us, in terms of integrity also as well. And and that spreads. That's as contagious as anything else. I read this quote. I don't know who to attribute it to, but it says, "Integrity is measured. It's the distance between your lips and your life.
Wow.
Integrity is the distance between your lips and your life." And yeah, so you want to manage your character, and then also the H in is your habits. We've heard the phrase, first you create your habits, then your habits create you. And I really do believe, like, I think Duke University said 40% of our behaviors each day is habitual. We're not even thinking about it. We're just on autopilot, which is great because it conserves, as, cognitive energy because there's a big load on, coming from life. But then we'd actually sit down and design those things. And so, yeah, who we spend time with is who we become. If you're around 9 broke people, be careful because you're probably going to be number 10, that kind of idea. But having a positive community of people that are supportive, and it's meant for like everything you date back, hunter gatherers, right? Survival. Those who had people watching their back and, had a village were more likely to be able to survive. And so we got to pick our village. um, the African proverb: if you want to go further, you go alone. If you want to, sorry, if you want to go faster, you go alone. If you want further, we go together.
I love that. And you are what you repeatedly do. I definitely
Hmm.
believe that to be true. Have you ever, I'm just curious, had
Yeah.
to unfriend somebody? What do you recommend for people that, like in that situation where they have a friend
Yeah.
group, but there's maybe 1 or 2 bad apples that you don't necessarily want to extract their habits and their patterns and energy from?
Yeah. I mean, I think my thing with, we could do anything, but we can't do everything. That's this idea is like, everyone has goals. You could do anything, but you can't do everything. And I think the same thing happens with people, not just ideas and things we're implementing, but individuals.
Mm.
Meaning that you could be a great friend, but you can't put all your energy everywhere because there's always this, that it could deplete you. And my feeling generally with that is that if somebody's drowning, certainly I want to help that person, right? And if I have, but if that person's going to pull me down and I'm going to drown also, and then I can't be there for my family and my friends and people are counting on me, then that could be an interesting choice point.
Some people also just don't want the help.
This is true. Some people like there's some things, and I don't know who's listening to this that needs to hear this, but some things like, if you're in a storm right now, some things you can only learn in a storm, for sure. And then also, some people create a storm and they're upset that it rains, so I don't know, like, but yeah, when it comes to people, having a positive peer group is important, but it's about energy, right? And it's like some people are energy vampires. Some people are batteries included, but there's some people just, I don't know where their batteries are, but they're stealing your batteries. They're stealing your dreams, they're stealing your hope. And some people could actually be sincere, meaning they could have positive intent because that's, the road, right, is paved with positive intentions. Um, they don't want to, maybe they're saying like, why are you always listening to, Genius Life and reading all those books and, listening to, and or eating all those foods and stuff like that. But, maybe they're saying it because they don't want to lose you because you're growing and, they want to stay connected to you. Or maybe they don't want you to get your hopes up, or it can have some kind of positive intent. But they can be sincere, but they can be sincerely wrong also as well. So I think you can still love, especially if it's family or friends. You can still love them, but it doesn't mean you have to spend a whole lot of time with them, and having borders again and boundaries. You make sure when you say yes to somebody or something, we're not consistently saying no to ourselves.
I love that.
Yeah.
And, certainly this isn't the case for everybody, but we do live in a time that seems to applaud, at least to some degree, victim mindset.
Mhm.
Now there's an emotional home for people that just live in this persistent state of victimhood. And I think that's really unfortunate as well.
Yeah, I think, and this is all about, for me, it's all about maintaining our agency, our responsibility, our accountability, because I mentioned this on a previous episode with you, but it's, when I got to spend time with Stan Lee, I was like, who's your favorite superhero? And he says, Iron Man. And he's like, Jim, who's yours? And I said, Spider-Man, because he had the Spider-Man tie on. And Spider-Man was one of my favorite because he was like, I wasn't really smart back in high school, but I was definitely like kind of bullied and awkward. And, I still reverse things, Max. And, sometimes maybe because of my head injuries and stuff, when I read, sometimes I reverse things or I hear things. I was like, yeah, you're right. With great, because when I said Spider Man, he says, with great power comes great responsibility. And I reversed it. I was like, you're right. And the opposite is also true. With great responsibility comes great power. When we take responsibility for something, we have great power to make it better. But, making complaining and making excuses, it doesn't feel like it's taking a whole lot of responsibility. And it's just, if anything, it takes up a lot of energy and a lot of time that could be used to making things better. And some people, when people are complaining, like most people, honestly, this it's called the spotlight effect. The spotlight effect is where we emphasize like what people are thinking about us, or if even they're thinking about us at all, right, in terms of comparison and everything. But I would say that, and some people are just happy that it's you, that you're going through all this stuff, and they're just happy, but but it doesn't affect real change. And so I think it's important for us to take personal responsibility. Even if I was to talk to the 9-year-old version of myself that was, really strong, I would say like, hey, you are 100% responsible for your life. And that's kind of harsh, but the truth is, yes, if where we are right now, it's been shaped by our past experiences, external factors, the expectations of other people and everything. But we are 100% responsible for our life right now and moving forward. And when we claim responsibility and agency, we have the power to make things better. Because if what's the alternative? Like we just, complain. I mean, like, yes, we can complain and it could be true. And so what? Like what has changed in our life?
So well said. How can we become better learners? You talked about meta learning
Hmm.
before, but I mean, I think like this whole process of knowledge acquisition, retention, and utilization. How can we
Yeah.
become better at that? I'm also really interested in this topic. I'd love if you could speak to this.
Yeah.
The idea of verbal fluency.
Hmm.
You listen to some people, such as yourself, such as Jordan Peterson, Russell Brand, people
Hmm.
with profound skills when it comes to the verbal fluency, being able to like not just retain knowledge, but to spit it out like
Hmm.
like a linguistic surgeon. I think that's a skill that a lot of people, especially with the proliferation of podcasts and apps like Clubhouse and things like that, really
Right.
want. So if you have, yeah,
Yeah.
how can we better achieve
Do
that?
you think there's a parallel between that and being able to express yourself, not just like verbally, so people could hear it auditorily, but also through writing? Do you think
Hmm.
some people that, in your background have,
There's
as a,
probably a correlation. I think I mean, some people are better writers than they are
Mhm.
speakers. Some people are better speakers than they are writers. Some people are great at both.
Yeah. I mean, and also how it presents itself. Part of it, was definitely trained. So I just need to address the thing that I wasn't like born to any degree. I'm successful in those kind of areas. It's definitely not something that I was born with. It's something that was trained through patience, through persistence, through practice. And so it's definitely not a natural gift for me. My teachers would have been surprised I read a book, dude.
Hmm.
Like if none, much less wrote a book. I was on the debate team for literally one day, and so I joined because I needed to up my my criteria to be getting into school and stuff like that back in high school. And I was just like, I can't do this. I was like so paralyzed. I mean, I think a lot of it also comes from the amount of input I have
Hmm.
in terms of reading. So I get to read and see the different styles from all the different authors, and see certain things I like, certain things. There's no such thing, I believe, as necessarily in a lot of ways a good or bad memory. I think there's more of a trained memory and untrained memory. It certainly helps that I can remember these quotes, my sayings, over pretty easily and effortlessly, just because that muscle has been flexed for so many years.
Do you write them first? Like, what's
Yeah,
your process like?
yeah. If I see a great quote in a book, I'll highlight it. I will write it down or put it in a notepad.
Hmm.
I'm also a little practice because some of it is spaced repetition where I'll look at it pretty every so often and even comment with these quotes. If I come up with my own quote, I'll comment it on on your Instagram or other peers because they'll post something. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting on kindness, or responsibility or accountability, or growth, and then I'll put like my quote there. So then I get to see it. So the repetition definitely helps. Um, and so, and also it's personally meaningful for me, meaning that, when you tie something to your purpose, it's a whole lot easier. Just like when people learn something and they're interested in that topic, and they have higher fidelity and they're able to not only learn it better, but retain it longer also as well. When it comes to a model of accelerated learning, and we've covered in different portions of these, and maybe you could put in your show notes, in previous episodes. Um, let me show you my model for it. This is my framework for accelerated meta learning, and I'll make this interactive with everyone who's listening because I would actually love to ask you. I'll run you through the model. All right, so. If you're not working out and or driving or something that's dangerous, like maybe take notes on this, and that'll work. So I want everyone to take out a piece of paper and just think about an area of your life where you feel stuck, and I did this on a podcast on how to get unstuck. It was this story where this truck driver wasn't paying attention, as often we don't pay attention in life, and he ends up going underneath a bridge, and the bridge is too low for his cargo, and he gets stuck. And so what do we do? That's like what we do in life. Sometimes we're not paying attention, we hit something, we get stuck, immobilized, and what do? You just start putting on the gas, and sometimes we like, oh, we're stuck in this relationship, I'm stuck in this button, I have to work harder. And then he just gets more and more stuck, right? And then he tries to back out, and by that time he can't anymore because he's really in there. And then all this traffic starts building up behind him, obviously, and it starts to really, really build up. And crowds start showing up, wondering what's going on, getting out of their cars and everything. And then emergency vehicles come, and they don't know what to do. They start pushing like the truck through the bridge, and nothing. They start trying to pull it out, nothing. And then there's this 6-year-old child, there watching all this with his parents, and he was like, why don't you let out some of the air in the tires? He did it. The truck came down, and obviously it came out because what the adults wanted to do is they wanted to blow up they were going to destroy the truck,
Mm.
right? And that's kind of like the elusive obvious. And I think sometimes, even when you're looking at health and the state of health, sometimes the elusive obvious is, it's right there in front of us. That a child could see it. But there's so much complexity out there, and anybody can they make things more complex. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with complexity, but sometimes people use it to create, chaos and confusion. And sometimes it's, the simple answer is sometimes the best. So I want to think about an area you feel stuck, where you feel like, and limitless is not, let's get clear. Limitless is not about being perfect, right? Limitless is about advancing. It's about making progress, not comparing yourself to anybody else, but, who you were yesterday, or maybe the best version of yourself. For me, it's always been, who do I want to make proud? It's always been the same answer. I got this question like 15 years ago. Like, who do you want? Why are you doing what you do? Because I think purpose plays a big role in what motivates us to excel, right? Um, who are we doing it for? Who's counting us to be, on our A game, right? To be able to show up really well. And for me, I want to make proud two people, right? And a lot of people, when I say that, they automatically think of, parents or something. And that's actually never. I mean, I want them to be, but I have no control over whether or not people perceive that, or kids or whatever. But I always want to make that, that 90-year-old version of myself proud, the 90-year-old me.
Mm.
And then, and then the 9-year-old me, thinking about that 9-year-old boy who was labeled broken, by a teacher, or, bullied and everything else. I want that boy to be proud of who he's becoming. But that's my purpose, going back to that. So feel like where you're not making progress, and maybe where you feel like you're in a box, everyone. And that box, and well, maybe it's maybe it's your health or wellness, maybe it's relationships, maybe it's financial or impact. Um, that box is by definition three-dimensional. So the three forces that contain that box, but there are three forces that will liberate you out of that box. And I call it the limitless model. And going to answer your question for meta learning, draw a Venn diagram. So I want everyone to draw three intersecting circles and kind of like Mickey Mouse, two ears that overlap and a face that overlap with those two ears. And even if you can't draw it, just imagine it. And even if you can't imagine it, because people then imagine you can imagine it, right? And then so I'm going to illustrate those three dimensions by three M's, right? The last one, the face, I'll start with, which is the one on the bottom, are the methods. Those are the methods of accelerated learning: how to remember names, how to learn a language, how to memorize a TEDx talk or a toast at a wedding, how to read faster. Those are methodologies. And, in the case of, maybe health, maybe it's methods for intermittent fasting, right? Or whatever, fitness or whatever happens to be, exercise. Everybody knows the methods, but if they're still stuck in a box, then something's not being addressed, right? Two forces. Sometimes they're invisible. So those are the first two circles. The first one is your mindset. Right. And we alluded to that, in the beginning. Mindset for me, very specifically, is the set of assumptions and attitudes. It's attitudes and assumptions about something.
Hmm.
So your mindset is your mindset about health. What are your attitudes and assumptions about health? What are your attitudes, assumptions about money? What's your attitude? Because that's certainly going to affect things, right? Your attitudes, assumptions about relationships, and what it means to be, you know, um, a good friend. Attitudes is assumptions also about yourself. So let's start there. So three things I know would fall in that circle for everybody, and people could write this down. What I believe is possible, right? Because someone could learn a method on how to get super fit or cut or whatever, right? But if their mindset is I don't believe it's possible, then they're still stuck in that box,
Right.
right? They can learn a methodology for remembering names and faces, but if they believe, oh, I'm too old, I'm really dumb, I was able, then they're still stuck. So mindset, what I believe is possible. Second one, what I believe I'm capable of. Because somebody could believe it's possible for you, Max, but they might not believe they're capable of it,
Hmm.
right? And so that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, the method, they're not even going to do the method because all behavior is belief driven, right? And so, I always tell people, like, people come. I did just this yesterday morning when I was speaking. People at the break are like, oh, Jim, I'm just really have a horrible memory. I just say, look, stop. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them, right? Because like whatever, your brain is like this supercomputer, and your self talk is the program it will run. So if you tell yourself, I'm not good at remembering names, you will not remember people's names because you just program your computer not to,
It's
right?
a limiting belief, right?
It certainly is. In there in Limitless, I talk about 7 lies to learning because I think learning precedes everything, right? And whatever you're going to apply that to. And one of the lies is like genius is born. Like people either have, but we just talk about how genius is built, right? And different things, or how your memory is fixed, right? And like your shoe size, and it's absolutely not true, right? And so we debunk those lies. A lie for me stands for, of course, stands for something. Limited idea entertained.
Hmm.
It's a limited idea that you're entertaining. It's not necessarily true that you're too old or you're not smart enough or you're not capable. It's just an idea that we're giving it certainty when it doesn't have to have it. You know what it is? It's just a bunch of BS, right? Belief systems, right? So everything stands for something. It's all the negative belief systems that we have. But going back to mindset, what I believe is possible, what I believe I'm capable of. And the third one I'll throw in there, if we want to get really raw in this conversation, what you believe you deserve. In terms of, I think a lot of times, like people might think it's possible or maybe they're capable of it, but they self sabotage, right? Because they don't believe they deserve it because of something, expectations, opinions of parents or whatever it is, or, past something they were hurt in a relationship or whatever. They don't believe they deserve that money. They don't deserve to be healthy. If somebody doesn't believe it's possible for them to heal, or they don't believe they deserve to be healthy and heal, what are those methods going to do for them, right? So these are the things that need to be addressed. We talk about different strategies in the book, but then there's also, there's talk therapy, right? There's things that people could do with plant medicine, and stuff like that. There's EFT, emotional freedom technique, tapping, right? EMDR. There's all kinds of strategies, self-hypnosis, a lot of strategies, but how can you address it unless you pinpoint it, right? Otherwise, if you're not, the beginning point of anything for people to change is awareness. And some people aren't even aware, and they're wondering why, how come I know all this stuff and I'm not doing any of this stuff, right? Because that first M is not being addressed. And then,
I started doing talk therapy over the course of the pandemic for the first time in my adult life. And my therapist practices, she specializes in EMDR.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm a fan.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. And then tapping is just like an extension of that you can do on your own,
hmm
right? It's so cool.
Yeah, there's so many resources that are available for people, who are just looking, and willing to do their research. And I appreciate everybody who's even on that path because, I believe that there's a version of ourselves that we haven't met yet, and the goal is to keep showing up every single day, right, until we're introduced to that person, until we get to meet that person. But so first of all, it's mindset. I put that first because initially, Limitless was a book all on methods. It was just everything what I teach, for individuals and organizations on how to accelerate their learning and stuff. But before I hit send to my publisher, I was like, okay, this is my first book. I got to get this right. I want to be proud of this myself. Will 100% of the people read this book get, the results that they're hoping for? And my honest answer was no way, they won't, because they're not doing because I'm not addressing these two other areas, right? A lot of people know what to do, but they don't do what they know. Because the truth is, people know what they should be doing, but common sense is not common practice. So what keeps us from it? Mindset. The second M, the final M, is motivation, right? And I could break down motivation, and we could put accelerate learning. And I'd love to talk to you about these three areas. And when it comes to health, because I always like text you about like, hey, I have this person, I have this, or I have this issue, and I'm sure you get a lot of those texts. But so the second M is motivation, because you could have a limitless mindset. You could believe it's possible for me to learn this or to have this body or to have this relationship, whatever, and know what to do. But you can be not motivated. So then if you're not motivated and you're procrastinating, then you're stuck in that box. Because if you self-sabotage, for mostly that's a mindset issue. You don't believe you deserve it or you're capable of it. But if you procrastinate, that's definitely a motivation issue,
Hmm.
right? And so you're not motivated to get unstuck. And so motivation for me is three forces, and this is the formula for limitless motivation. If you get anything out of this conversation, my big pet peeve is knowledge is not power. Like that's one of the lies I talk about in there in mindset. You have to dissolve that. Knowledge is potential power. It becomes power when we utilize it, right? Like somebody could read your book, and if they don't apply it, the truth is they're no different than somebody who's illiterate that couldn't read the book in the first place, right? And so all the podcast programs, coaching online, everything, none of it works unless we work, right? That's the truth. That being said, what motivates yourself and how do you motivate other people? You motivate your significant other, your kids to clean their room or to study, your prospects to be able to buy something that you have to offer. Here's the formula: P times E times S3. And I put a lot in, this is my 30th year of teaching. So I have a lot of field testing in terms of why do some people go through our program, 100 people from 195 nations, and some people just don't complete it at all. P times E times S3. P, we've already mentioned, is purpose. All right. It's interesting. I had this encounter with somebody that I wouldn't say as a friend, but an acquaintance. And as context, this person was very unhealthy. I mean, like tipping point. I was like, he's a walking time bomb.
Hmm.
And friends, family, acquaintances, we were all just like, hey, why don't you stop doing this or start doing this? The thing never changed, right? And eventually has a heart attack, almost dies, and he goes back to his old lifestyle,
Wow.
right? And and but I see him on the street recently, and I was like, I didn't even recognize him, and because he looked familiar, but I was like, he was very different. And not only does he look younger and healthier, but he had just this glow about him. And I was like, like what happened? I was like, I'm just curious. Like he's like, oh, I'm doing this and this and I'm like, yeah, well, we've been telling you that for years. You should be doing that. Why are you doing it now? He's like, I came back from a business trip, and then my daughter was hysterical, like crying out of her mind. And when she finally stopped, she had a dream that I died and I wasn't, there, and this whole thing. And once he's like, everything changed, right? That's purpose, right? Purpose for a lot of people, it's not. Anyone can get intellectual, cognitive purpose. Oh, I want to hit these goals because I want to make more money, and I want to. Everyone knows that, but if they don't feel it, they don't do anything about it, right? And I always go back to feelings because that's even core to memory. Information by itself is forgettable, but when you tie emotion to something, it becomes unforgettable. It's just like Maya Angelou's, saying that people forget what you say, they'll forget what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Hmm.
Right. And then, but especially that's other people. But when we think about ourselves, like what are the things that we're remembering, the things that we feel? And if we don't feel that purpose, we're not going to do anything about it. So my big thing is get out of your head and put it in your heart. Right. That's the formula: head, heart, hands. Even if you look at the 3 M's, mindset's head, motivation's heart, and method is the hands, how you're going to actually use this stuff. Right. So you're going from head to your heart to your hands. And if you're just keeping your head, you have KPIs, goals, vision, whatever it is, but you're not acting with your hands because we're not logical. We're just not. We're biological, certainly. You think about dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. We're just this chemical soup, right? And so, if you're a person that you want to motivate, this is for yourselves. But if you want to motivate your spouse or your kids or someone to buy, people don't buy logically; they buy emotionally, and they justify logically, right? So you got to get them to purpose. Now, here's the thing: that's the first part. Somebody can have limitless purpose and still procrastinate, not be motivated. You need E, and you're an expert at this. E stands for energy. A lot of time, let's say somebody's not sleeping, they have a newborn child, or they're freaked out with the pandemic and everything that's going on. They haven't slept in 3 nights. They're not going to be very motivated to work out. They're just not, right? Because exhaustion will make a coward out of anybody, right? It'll just stall everything. If, let's say, I say, people see photos of me with Elon or Oprah or these people. We bonded over books. That's my secret, right? I'm just very well read, and and these people, leaders are readers, right? And so, if to get through a book a week, the average person who just reads like 200 words a minute, about 45 minutes a day, right? The average book has about how many I don't know how many words you have in your book, but on Amazon they say
I think about 80,000, 80 to 100,000, something like that, if I recall correctly.
Which is more than the average book, but the average book has about 64,000 around. So the average person reads 200 words a minute. So that takes 320 minutes to get through a book. Sounds like a lot, but if you divide that by 7, that's about 45 minutes a day, right? And you triple your reading speed, like 15 minutes a day, right? So that's why it's not, but 45 minutes a day, let's say you want to do that. That's your goal, to be motivated to read 45 minutes a day, but you just ate a big processed meal and you're in a food coma, right? Energy's down, then you're not going to be motivated, right? And so it has to be addressed. Stress takes a lot of energy out of the system. So it's not just about time management, priority management. What about energy management, right? And here's the thing: you do not have energy. You're like, yes, that's the problem. I do not have any energy. You do energy. You know what I mean? A big part of what we teach with quick learning, the principle is you take your nouns, you turn them into verbs, meaning people hypnotize themselves. Like I think your show, my show, it's about transcending. Big part of it is ending the trance, transcend, right? You end the trance about what's possible. And part of it is coming from the outside, marketing, media saying you're broken and you just like, fear, everything else like that. So that's a trance, but also it's self hypnosis. When you say, I don't have creativity to write today, you don't have creativity, you do creative things, right? I don't have focus to get things done. You don't have focus, you do focus, right? So we could hypnotize ourselves with the language saying, I have this, as opposed to I could do this. And so going back to energy, you don't have energy, you do things to help create energy, right? So if you're stressed all the time, that's taking, energy out of the system. If you're around energy vampires, taking energy out of the system, right? If you're not exercising, you're not generating energy. If you're not sleeping, so on. So you need to optimize your energy. Things that everything that you talk about on your show. And then finally, somebody could have the P and the E, purpose and limitless energy, and still not be motivated. And I was thinking, like, because I know people who are fit in that category, but they're still not doing this stuff. And I was like, oh, that thing can be too big. Like, oh, I want to meet the love of my life and live happily ever after. I want to have that perfect body, or I want to get 1 million followers, or whatever it is, right? Build the next unicorn. That's way too big. So S3 in the equation, the final part, small, simple steps. I think one of the things that halts our progress and demotivates us is if you're intimidated by something or you're confused. And we know a confused mind doesn't do anything, right? So clarity is power, small, simple steps. We've had on our show people like James Clear about atomic habits, tiny habits, Dr. BJ Fogg, break things down into small, simple steps. And so here's the magic thing. So if you want to work out and that's you want to be motivated to work out, right? As your body moves, your brain grooves. Exercise is probably one of the most documented thing that's good for your brain, right? It's good for your heart, it's good for your head, right? Brain-derived neurotropic factors, all of that. But if you're not doing that, and I don't just mean working out, I mean just like moving throughout the day. Let's start like there. But if you're not doing that, maybe that's too big and that's too intimidating. A small, simple step, put on your running shoes, right? It's the hard part is like getting into the gym, right? If you want to get your kids to floss their teeth, they're just not doing it. Floss one tooth, right? No one's going to stop at one tooth. They want to clean the room, just get them to put one sock in the hamper, right? Inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard, it's too hard. That's just true, right? And if someone can't read 45 minutes a day, I totally get it. That's brand. Open up the book. How about that, right? Right. Read one line, and consistency, little by little, a little becomes a lot, right? So that's the equation I would say. And you could take this and superimpose it for yourself, but also if you need to motivate somebody else, say you need them to feel the purpose because without reasons, you won't get the result. 100%. Are they just not having energy? Because some people, and you could do this at a global scale too. Like if you look at what people think, like just what's in the media sphere, about social justice, about pandemics, everything. You could break things down into mindset, motivation, and methods. About purpose and energy doesn't have to be just physical. It could be capital, right? It could be resources. At a micro level or at a community, nation, global, macro level. And then finally, the last one are methods. And I'll leave everybody with this because I want to ask you a question about this model where mindset crosses over with motivation, because there are other words that you hear in the personal development or performance, where mindset and motivation cross over. You have inspiration. I'm gonna give everyone three eyes. Inspiration, like what does an inspiring speaker do or an inspiring movie do for you? It changes your mindset about what's possible and it gives you some little drive and some purpose and motivation, right? But you're inspired, but you don't know what to do, right? Because you don't have the methods. Where mindset crosses over with methods, you have the second eye, which is ideation, right? You believe it's possible in your mind and then you're capable of it and you know what to do, but you don't have the motivation, right? So it's just an idea. And that's pretty common. A lot of people have a lot of ideas. And finally, where motivation and methods cross over, you have the third and final eye, and that's implementation. Someone's motivated, they have purpose, they have energy, and they have the methods. And so that's implementing. That person's going to be implementing for a long time, but they're still could be stuck in that box because they're only going to be able to achieve what their mindset allows because it's not covering mindset. And then where all three M's and all three I's collect right in the middle, here's a fourth and final I, that's integration. Right in the middle, the center where all three M's and I's connect, that's integration. And for me, that's the limitless state. That's a state where it's just who you are, right? And so when I'm talking to somebody who's excels like yourself, when I'm having conversations with somebody about getting a certain result is I believe when you're talking about the genius life is that genius leaves clues. That if somebody is extraordinary in an area with their finances, in their relationship, with their health and wellness, right? With their learning, right? That they're doing certain things other people aren't doing. There's a method behind what looks like magic to the rest of the world. And so when I'm looking for my superpower that I developed over time out of necessity. My inspiration was my desperation. I was on the other side of the bell curve that made the other one like even possible, right? So I struggled so much. And so out of necessity, I had to come up with this, and then coaching people on how to do this. When I talk to you, if I want to talk to you about longevity and energy and all the stuff that you've done with, in your research and your journalism and your writing, is I'm breaking things down into mindset, motivation, and methods. And if there's this stopgap between where they are and where they want to be, you have to address the bottleneck, right? Because a part of this is we're unlimiting these areas, right? Because if somebody is like not having energy so if somebody doesn't have what they want, I'm like, okay, do they believe it's possible? Do they believe they're capable of it? Do they believe they deserve it? And if that's fine, great. But if it's not, then that has to be addressed first. And then motivation, do they have purpose? Or maybe it's here, but they're not feeling their purpose, or do they not have energy? Do they not have capability, right? Because they're stressed out of their mind or their spouses, like berating them and taking all their energy and drive. Are they making it too confusing and too overwhelming? Like thinking is good, but overthinking it and wanting to be perfect, perfectionism, that's not good, right?
Right.
So maybe not breaking down to tiny little steps. Or maybe they're using old methods for health and wellness. Maybe they're using old methods for learning, like rote repetition or, like the old study ways or old methods for dating or, whatever. And it's just not good for the times. And so, when we're talking, you and I, about longevity or health or recovery, my thoughts are like, what are your beliefs about your mindset around health? Like, what are the things that you believe? What are the things you're embarrassed to admit, like that you used to believe, lies? Like, because I would willing to bet for the people who are really exceptional in these areas, there's a common thread of beliefs. Like, do you believe health is something that's static? Like a lot of people in most of society think like, hey, it's just like, this is what I'm worth financially, or this is just what I'm worth in a relationship, or this is what health is, just I either have it or I don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think of health as being as just having a nice body, having a six pack,
Right.
having a lean toned midsection and strong muscular arms. But health is so much more than that.
Right. And that's their mindset. That's their assumptions, or maybe even and some people have an attitude around health too. That
Yeah.
it's either boring or it's something that's,
Well, I think some people feel like they don't deserve it. They can't attain it. When people have, it's sort of like turning a cruise ship around for some people, because they feel like their optimal health is so far from their present state. But I love the idea of small, simple things that you can do every day, because over the long term, those small, simple things add up. And what you were saying about letting perfect be the enemy of the good, that's a major problem in health. There's like there's often this perfectionist mindset, and it's propagated by influencers for the most part. I mean, it's not propagated by scientists. You're not going to see this notion of perfectionism in the nutritional literature. So I think that's the kind of the message that comes across sometimes, especially via social media and, also mainstream media, movies and things like that.
Or maybe people might have picked up, when it comes to health, like it's, like, oh, it's just genetics or something like that. And that would keep people stuck in a box.
Yeah.
Right?
Or that you have to go to the gym and you have to have an hour-long workout. And for you to have had a good workout, you have to leave the gym sweating. You've got to be sore the next day. None of those are indicators of having had a good workout, by the way.
Right.
So,
and those are assumptions, and those are that assumptions will keep people stuck, right? Those are assumptions that are not necessarily true. And just same thing with fitness, they have around food.
Yeah, people have misconceptions around food, that you have to eat a certain way. You have to be either strict keto, that keto is the best diet for health, which is not true. I mean, it's indicated for certain therapeutic purposes, and I've talked ad nauseum about the potential benefits of a ketogenic diet. But then we have low carb dieters, and we have low fat dieters, and then you have vegan voices that are telling you that if you ever eat animal products, you're gonna develop heart disease and kneel over and croak. So yeah, there are a ton of misconceptions when it comes to diet. When in reality, it's sometimes the simplest answer. What was what you said about the most obvious, oftentimes being the most oblivious?
It's the elusive obvious, they call it. It's kind of like, this is kind of, I don't know. I don't know when we should look at that, when the toilet was invented, but I guarantee you toilet paper wasn't invented that same year. Right. So, and it probably was a decade or more. So that's the elusive obvious, right?
That's interesting.
And so, it's kind of like, with the child looking at the, at the tires. And so this idea here is that even when we're talking about mindset, some people are so stressed out about their diet that it negates potentially any benefit they're going to get from it because of this. It's not just what you eat, it's how you eat. Right. And the feelings that you're bringing into that process. And some people are eating, they're not even present. They don't even taste the food, right? Or they're doing a million different things, at the same time, or they're working. So they're not even in that kind of rest, digest place.
That's an important point. I think one tip that will help pretty much anybody is to be present with your food. To stop eating while you are distracted, watching TV or on your computer. There are studies that show that people tend to consume about 15% more calories when they're eating food while distracted by an e-reader or watching TV, et cetera. And so many people, again, not letting perfect be the enemy of the good, I will eat in front of my TV too. Yeah. I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I'll whole bag paleo pretzels, paleo puffs, whatever it is.
I didn't even know that phrase.
Smart sweets. Yeah. You heard it here first. It's a Genius Life original. I will whole bag. There's this pretzel brand. What are they? Quinn pretzels. Dude, have you ever tried a Quinn paleo pretzel? They have a new flavor. We're not sponsored by them. Garlic pepper.
But contact Genius Life.
Yeah. Sponsor us. So good. And I'll go through the whole bag. Yeah. I'm not even kidding you. My brothers look at me like I'm an insane person.
Yeah, and again, for all this, we don't have to like the idea behind this is thinking is good, but overthinking and wanting to be perfect, I don't think anyone would say that's good for anybody. So this would just be one example of a conversation I would have about our mindset that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, again, most people we're learning all the methods, people are posting all the methods, or we're hearing about it. But I just think a big part of success is just the invisible stuff that's going on in our minds that came there through our upbringing and expectations and we delete and we distort and we sometimes we generalize things to kind of fit a certain kind of mold that around certain expectations and it can lead to erroneous behaviors and also certainly a skew in the results we're hoping for.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you something about. You were talking about the benefits of reading,
Mhm.
in regard to knowledge and language acquisition. Is there any functional difference between reading a physical book versus listening to an audiobook? Because some people prefer to listen to
Yeah,
audiobooks.
I like both. I mean, I like watching YouTubes for your podcast, which I'm a fan, and I also like to listen to it also as well. When it comes to reading, I think it's the best way to compress information. I think reading is to your mind what exercises to your body. I just think it's a powerful way to kind of keep your brain just fit. That being said, yes, there is. In terms of uh, audio and like audiobook and reading from a print or digital, let's talk about that first. Um, in terms of retention and comprehension, it's actually skews for reading an actual book instead of listening to it.
Interesting.
And one of the reasons is the contributing factor. This is kind of obvious, but when you're listening to a podcast or listening to an audiobook, we're usually doing something else,
Mm,
right? You're working out, you're driving, you're cleaning the house. So that's just your attention, and potential distractions because you're multitasking. And I think that's a big contributing factor. Usually when someone's reading, they're just reading. They're not driving or working out or cleaning their house. Right. So I think that's a big part. For me, I prefer physical books. I don't know. How are you? Like digital when I travel because I don't want to. I read a lot, so I don't want to like carry. I'm traveling for the next few weeks, so I don't want to be carrying like lots of books.
yeah.
That's not practical and luggage and everything. But
Right. I often do both. Like I have your book, the physical
mhm.
copy, but then I also like to be able to listen to it
Yeah,
via audiobook when I'm sitting in my car. And I know a lot of people who have bought, my books, Genius Foods or The Genius Life. Oftentimes the people who prefer audiobooks will buy the audiobook first.
yeah,
But then there's so much information that they tend to
mhm,
then end up going and also buying the physical book
yeah,
so that they can highlight and dog ear pages and things like
yeah.
that.
I'm a big fan of that. With our audiobook, we did something where I read the chapter and then I had a friend in studio come in and she would ask me questions about that chapter. So we had these little discussions after every single one. So there's, like you could do more, you could do various things, right? My thing is there's no right or wrong. I just want people to do it. Digital readers are interesting. They're convenient, just like digital note taking is convenient. Like some people like to handwrite notes, other people like to digitally note take. And when they're tested, when students are tested, whether for comprehension and retention, between handwriting notes and digital note taking, handwriting notes actually score better.
Wow.
Um, and digital is obviously better for storage, and it's obviously better for sharing with other people. Some people like handwriting, and one of the reasons why is because a lot of people could type pretty fast. Like a lot of people who are listening to this could type, pretty much as fast maybe as we're speaking, but you can't possibly handwrite that fast,
Right.
right? And so it forces you to filter the information, right? To listen for the most valuable information and as you're organizing in your notes. And with note taking for me, I've done multiple podcast episodes and I just have different ways of taking notes. For me, I put a line right down the page because I like handwriting notes and then digitizing them. But on the left side, I capture. On the right side, I create. So really simple. On the left side, I'm taking notes. On the right side, I'm making notes.
Hmm.
Meaning it's kind of like akin to left brain, right brain. And this is way oversimplification, right? Left brain, logical, right brain, like imagination, creativity. But it's kind of like on the left side, I would capture, oh, this is how you remember names. This is the best, genius foods, right? This is the best time to, how to optimize your sleep. You're capturing. But if your attention is going to go somewhere else, like you're going to get distracted, your imagination is going to pull you somewhere else. I'd rather it go on the right side of the page, right? Your creative side. So then you're just going to write your impressions of what you're capturing. oh, this is, how does this relate to what I already know? How am I going to use this? Right. When will I use this? Because I think honestly, for every hour you spend listening to a podcast or reading a book or on Clubhouse, I would say you got to spend at least another hour, like one to one, putting that stuff into action, and set a schedule. I think one of the most important performance, tools that we have, personal growth tools we have, is our calendar, and when we schedule everything, we schedule our meetings there. People, parents might schedule PTA meetings, investor meeting, whatever, doctor's appointments. But are we scheduling our own growth? Like we know if people don't write and schedule their meditation time, then you're busy. That all that void's gonna be filled, and at the end, we're like, oh, I didn't meditate, or I didn't work out today. Like I didn't do my Wim Hof breathing, or my, you know what I mean. If it's not scheduled, so I think it's just really important to get in the habit of doing that.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. My assistant Sydney, she schedules my workouts in the morning for me. But it's like a routine for me that I've adopted
Hmm.
and that I feel really good about. I like to work out fasted, and I like to eat around noon. So that means that the 10 to 11:30 block for me, uh, 5 days a week generally. That's like when I like to hit the gym. It makes
Between
it
10, yeah.
yeah, between 10 and 11.
Yeah, and that consistency is important. And for people that, I really do believe the treasure we seek is hidden in our daily routines. So I'm a big fan of having morning and evening routines and training it. And I think for habits, the most important thing is you want to make what's good for you. You want to make it as easy as possible, and you want to make the things that are not so good for you, more difficult.
Hey, if you like that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.
It says you'll upgrade your beliefs, you'll upgrade your skills, you'll upgrade your knowledge, and you'll absolutely change the disempowering, destructive habits you have right now. And you will become the type of man capable of achieving the goals. And he goes, by the way, every one of those goals is totally achievable. And I know because I've achieved way more than that in way less time.